right, so we are here for Reddit Q&A number 2. Um, I'm Josh, and I'm here with Chris, and we are going to do our best to answer some questions from the r/cooperatives page on the old Reddit. So let's take a look here and start with our first question. And it is from Mr. Uzin59. Ask, what is your opinion of the brightest career for the future in cooperative life? I'm thinking to go back to cooperative life. I was an accountant, but it's really boring and no future in my opinion. So what you guys can suggest me? My degree is business administration, so it's really wide topic. I can be anything, I guess. So what do you think? I am guessing, and this is just, from long experience, the way that's written, I'm thinking this guy's probably in India. But that's just because of the particular, misgrammar. Sounds like reads very much like a lot of guys, friends in Nepal. So I would guess from that part of the world, but we're here in the US. So if he is in India, I would say go into get hooked up with Amal. They seem like a good one. But for here in the US, what do you think, Chris? You have any opinions on where people should be looking if they want to do co-op stuff?
I don't know what that brightest career means. I said be a farmer. Like I know they're probably going with that
anywhere thinks being a farmer is nice. Well, no, I'm joking. I mean, it depends on what you mean by bright career, right? I mean,
yeah.
Are you looking for something fulfilling? Or are you looking for something that makes the most money? I will say, if you're looking for something that makes the most money and you're in the US, it seems to me the obvious thing to do, there's a lot of competition, but is to either start a nonprofit or get involved with one that's doing co-op development and that gets like grants from municipalities and other organizations that don't know anything about co-ops. Get large grants from them, do whatever, and pay yourself a large salary. That seems to be one way that people do make. Some people are able to make a fair amount of money in the co-op movement. But if your definition of brightest career isn't just making the most money, I think the thing to do is look around at your community and ask around, talk to people in your community and see what is needed in your community, and then organize people around that need. And that is going to be what is, going to lead to a bright future in your particular case, right? I don't think there are any universal answers to this, even in one country or another.
How about the farmers?
If that's what's needed.
Yeah, no, I mean it's just funny because like it just reminds me of how like when I was reading this, I was like, okay, well it seems like it's kind of getting funneled into basically co-op development. And I know you've made the comment, and our Gio's made the comment in the past, or some folks in Gio have made this comment that it's like everybody wants to be a developer, but like a lot of people don't want to actually do the work. And what's actually like for me, like what kind of like gives you a bright future? To me, it's like something that's gonna actually like give you autonomy in the future in the wake of collapse and all that. And you're not gonna have any autonomy if you can't even have local food. That's how I just harping on the farmer stuff, but also pushing back against this tendency for everybody to kind of like be doing the light work, or expecting someone. I'm not saying they're expecting that, but also there's for what it's worth, there's an one of the persons that's wanting to get involved in Geo, they have a business administration degree, I believe, and what they're doing is development. But it does seem like it's meaningful work for them where they're at. They're they're like part of this like business incubation department at the university, and then people from all over the place refer sort of like entrepreneurs, like small entrepreneurs to them. And they're trying to change the dialogue to just being like capitalists to doing cooperative stuff. So that's pretty cool. And I've always kind of wondered what can you do with a business administration degree that that's more in the realm of like horizontalism. And based on what I've seen about the work that they're doing, it does seem pretty meaningful. You know, this person's telling me about some of the situations that people are in, and yeah, there are people who are really down on their luck that are turning to that place, who have a lot of barriers, and they're just trying to survive. They're trying to survive without being dominated by someone else.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, I make some kind of tongue-in-cheek comments about the nonprofit industrial complex, co-op development, and co-op developers, as it were. But no, that's not to say that being a co-op developer is not useful. It's very useful, especially anybody who's ever tried to start a co-op. Like, it's super useful to have people who are knowledgeable about what you're trying to do to help you out. But what you pointed out, at the beginning there, Chris, is also true, and it's definitely something that I've noticed and have mentioned before, is that there are more people, and I think it's because there are so many like college educated folks who are interested in worker co-ops, and it's like, if you have a degree in something, you probably don't think of yourself as like becoming a worker owner in a housekeeping cooperative or in a restaurant, food service co-op or anything like that. And so, when you think about how can I be in the co-op movement, you probably think about something that's more like, office job paperwork kind of stuff. And it does, that sort of thing, there's definitely a place for that. Where I rub up against it, I guess, and it kind of rubs me the wrong way, is when certain people are making a whole lot of money, like outsized salaries for doing this. It's very few people, but then there are a whole lot of other people who are doing it, like a lot of us in Geo, either for free or for very reduced rates, not paying ourselves a living wage. What rankles me is when I see co-op developers making six-figure salaries, high five figures to, medium six-figure salaries, helping develop co-ops where the worker owners themselves are only going to be able to hope to make, maybe $20 an hour, 25 if they're lucky, and it's meanwhile you're taking home 150K, and patting yourself on the back for being such a good person and fighting against the system and going to conferences and talking about it. Like, it's not cool. And it's not solidarity. So I think and what you were saying, Chris, about, think about collapse, right? Like, we're at a time now where thinking about the future for a lot of us, and you can see I'm already a gray beard, but some of you guys with a few more years left in you than I've got, you can't, it's thinking about the future is very different than what your grandparents or my grandparents or parents were, when they thought about the future. To them, everything just keeps going up, right? We've just been on this trajectory. We just keep going. And I think a lot of us now, younger folks, younger than myself, see that it's the trajectory is now going, in the opposite direction, and you need to make plans for that. A guy whose politics I don't necessarily always agree with, but has a lot of good things to say on this, is John Michael Greer, and his kind of idiom, or his little saying, is collapse now and avoid the rush. And that's what I always tell people when they're thinking about, like, well, what do I do for retirement, or how should we be preparing for what's inevitably coming in our future and climate collapse and all this. It's like, get to know your neighbors and make friends and make sure you guys are on good terms, because that is what will get you through everything. And making sure that you can feed yourselves and house yourselves, and maybe even clothe yourselves. If you could do that as well, it'd be great. But all this kind of stuff, focusing on that locally, I think is very important for all of our futures. So
before we move on, I'm just kind of curious. Have you ever seen any statistics about like what co-op farms have succeeded and failed in the U.S.? Because I'm a I'm not really aware of much success in this locally, um, when it comes to the farm stuff, and I think that just also points to the importance of like how this stuff is not even people are not going to get good at this stuff overnight. We have to start now. Um,
Um, I I can't speak to I can't say for sure. I don't know the numbers. I haven't seen any particular research on it. I don't know anybody personally um, right now who's working on, I guess, a farm cooperative. We are connected at Geo with a guy, Ethan, who he wrote a great article for us some time ago called oh, what's it called? About the solidarity economy. I'm blanking on the name right now. Other futures are possible, I believe, is what it was. Ethan Miller. So look up Ethan Miller on Geo. You'll find the article. It was very kind of influential, I think, for a lot of people. And he is no longer active in Geo, but last I heard was on a like intentional community agricultural kind of co-op in Maine. So I do know, and also in Maine and maybe in some other states, there have been a couple of farm co-ops started by like African refugees. Um, so people from like Eritrea, um, Djibouti, Ethiopia, like that, showing coming as refugees, and then at least one that I can think of, and I think I think there's more than one, if I'm not mistaken. Farm co-op that's been started by them. I would give them a much higher chance of survival than just about anybody else, just strictly because they're coming from a more cooperative culture, and also are used to farming. So I cannot. I mean, we could, of course, like and I think you were thinking worker co-op farms. There are, of course, the huge agricultural cooperatives, Ocean Spray, um, you know, uh, Cenex Harvest States, where I'm at, is huge agricultural co-op, as well as oil and gas development, and so there are all those types of producer co-ops out there as well. That, I mean, they do technically fit the bill in some sense, but probably not what we're thinking about. And um, so I do know of a successful co-op, and this is again, this is actually a multi-stakeholder co-op here in Montana, where I'm at, the Old Salt Co-op, and it was started by three landowners who are three ranchers, three people who have been ranching. Their families have been ranching here for several generations, and they got together because they were all unhappy with the system where you raise the cattle here in Montana, ship them to Chicago, where you're at, Chris, to have them slaughtered and packaged, and then ship them back here so we can buy them at the grocery store. It makes no sense, right? And so they wanted to have a processing facility here in Montana. So they, all three of them, got together. They got the funding together to set up through USDA grants and set up a processing facility in Montana. It's multi-stakeholder, so landowners who are raising the cattle are owners. Also, the workers in the processing facility are owners, and then they also have opened up in Helena, Montana, a little restaurant cafe. I was in Helena visiting my folks last week, and we tried to get a reservation there. And my mom had set it up for two because she didn't know I was coming. And then when they tried to add one more, it was just like, nope, sorry, there's not a single table or a chair, in the place.
Need to get your shit together, Josh.
Yeah, well, I guess the point is they're doing amazing, right? Their processing facilities up and running, and their restaurant is just off the chain right now. So they're slammed all the time. So there's an ag co-op that is both multi-stakeholder and vertical, right? Going all the way from pasture to plate, and keeping it local. So and they're being successful despite being A bunch of white Americans who are not
Yeah.
necessarily well situated to doing co-op stuff. But in the ag sector, like I said, we're kind of used to having lots of large, big co-ops. So it's maybe not quite as crazy of an idea for some of the farmers and ranchers.
And you just did a long advertising bit for them. Just hit them up, see if we can get something.
I did. Well, I did an interview back before they had the production plant with Cole Mannix, one of the owners there, one of the landowners. So, yeah. So
this Q&A Reddit sponsored by
Old Salt Cooperative. Get your beef.
Yeah,
We'll probably mail it to you. I mean, I don't know for sure, but they may well be willing to box up some steaks with some ice and send them to you. So moving on, we have any tips on finding a tax accountant who specializes in co-ops? This actually plays back into the last one, because this guy, I forgot to mention, he says he was an accountant. That's a bright career in co-ops. We need lots of co-op accountants. Whoa, what's going on? What happened?
There you go.
Okay, I just tried to go backwards and it just went blank. And so anyway, yeah, but the guy asking about bright co-op careers as an accountant. We need lots of accountants for co-op. So, hi, Reddit family. This guy says, Mr. World Music Lover, I recently, Mr. or Miss, I don't know, recently co-founded a co-op based in the U.S., Colorado specifically, and we're looking to connect with accountants who specialize in cooperatives. This task seemed a bit harder task than we thought. Anyone have any tips on where to look, or even better, are you a tax accountant who specializes in co-ops? Chris, do you know anybody? They're in Colorado, but do you know anybody in the Chicagoland area?
Nah, I just heard people saying good things about the Wegner. It's not just Geo. I've heard other people say like they've had great experiences with Wegner for their co-op. In Chicago, there was. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say that's what Cheesy also recommended. Wegner.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was wondering, did you ever hear about the Blue Financial Solutions out of Chicago?
No, I did not.
I thought they were a worker co-op, but I remember when I saw their website in the past, I didn't see that they focused on co-op stuff. One of their members in the past, it was cool, is Danny Cappy. During the pandemic, they focused. They did this free session during the pandemic, just like giving people all this like advice about how to do their taxes in that weird situation. And it's just like typical, to me, it's like a typical cool like co-op person, just kind of like, doing concern for community. And yeah, they had like a Facebook stream here in Chicago. It was really cool. They're helping out a lot of people, just like filling all these questions. But now that's something else though. It's that was focusing just like on individuals, I think.
Yeah.
Shout out Daniel. Sorry, just shout out Daniel. I just like thinking about that really cool thing during that time.
Yeah, I mean, and that is one of the great things about working, with cooperators is people are usually willing to help, and often for free if they can afford to do so. I have to say, yeah, we started using Wegner. We really like them, but they are really full. I don't know. It's like I'm not sure. Like, don't quote me on this, but I think it might not be the easiest thing to get on as a new client with them, but definitely worth a shot. Good place to start. They are like the cream of the crop. And then somebody on the Reddit page linked to this Cooperatives Professional Guild. Very good resource, and one that I actually was not aware of. I've never been to this website before, which is kind of crazy given what I do for a living. I know about this group, but I did not know they had a website and a directory. So even for somebody who thinks they might be a little bit knowledgeable about co-ops, coming to the Reddit Cooperatives page. Thank you, Thomas Beckett. Shout out to Tom Beckett. He's also a co-op professional. But yeah, so this coopguild.wildapricot.org /members-by-state looks like the place to go. And this is by far the best list of people, co-op professionals I've ever come across. Now, even though we have this big list, of course, it's a big country, and a lot of these people, as you can see, well, these are all accepting new clients, but we have some like this not in private practice at this time or not accepting new clients. So you are definitely, you're going to have to look around a bit to find somebody. But this is another, this is another reason, if you know anybody who is an accountant like the last guy and wants to get out of boring ass corporate world, convince them to learn about co-ops and become a co-op accountant, because we need more people on this page. So
yeah, it'd be cool to see. Is it customary for there to be kind of like what people are charging up front? Because I think some of the professionals there needs to be a regulation of some of the prices some of the professionals are charging.
Well, yeah, I don't know that we're going to be able to manage that one. But yeah, I mean, at least they should tell you up front, so you know what you're getting yourself into. But this is the problem when you're getting professional help at all, legal or accounting, unless you're just like shooting the shit with somebody at a conference and they'll give you some free advice. Yeah, professionals don't work cheap. Same thing for tech stuff. I mean, I used to think that paying $60 an hour was like outrageous, because I've never even dreamed of making like, I made a third of that. It was like, oh wow, I'm doing well. So it just seems outrageous. But then you realize what the going rates are, and you kind of don't have a choice. So again, why we need more co-op professionals. We can have maybe a little more competition, drive some of those down. Although it also tells you something about the people, how much they're going to charge you if they don't have any kind of sliding scale. If they're, tells you what kind of clientele they're trying to serve.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think a consumer cooperative is very necessary for some of the professional things that I've seen to help regulate like what's fair.
Oh yeah.
Like from what I've seen, man, like the co-op, I stay away from the professionals because it's too expensive. Like to me, it seems very obvious that really the co-op movement is meant for white people with money, upper middle class. So
are you talking food co-ops specifically, or just co-ops in general, housing co-ops, worker co-ops?
Yeah, what I've seen. But I'd be interested to hear what people say. It'd be cool to hear people's experiences with trying to like get help, and then what prices that are offered, and
I'll say this about like professional co-op development services that I've seen. I mean, there are definitely some, like the SELC has done a really good job of making themselves as available as possible. They do monthly legal cafes where anybody can just drop in and ask a question on like a Zoom call kind of situation. Even though they're only in California, they will talk to anybody from anywhere. But again, they're completely like slammed. They have way more people who need their help than they have the capacity to give. So, there are good people in the professional like fields, professional co-op development that, will, do their best to make their services available to everybody. But, they also, everybody has to pay the bills at some point too. But I think you're right, Chris, or at least I mean, I agree with you that a lot of the professional co-op development services, especially for like food co-ops and for worker co-ops, do seem to be geared more towards people with resources. And if you are not middle class, upper middle class, if you're living paycheck to paycheck or paycheck to 3 days before paycheck, and you're trying to, get out from underneath your, minimum wage, manual labor, fast food service job, or whatever it is, good luck coming up with $1,500 to pay a co-op developer to help you get through the process, right? Like, so I think you're right. To me, again, being a poor white guy, I don't see it so much through a racial lens, also because I'm in a very white state. So most of our oppression is just divvied out on the basis of class. But that's definitely the thing. Like, I've seen some of the prices. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like, oh, it'd be great to talk to you, but I would have to take a second job, and trying to start a co-op is already a second job.
For the consultation. Right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You gotta take another job with the man just to pay for the worker co-op consultation. But I don't want to, be too disparaging. Like I said, there are the people who are, doing their best to answer people's questions the best they can. This is why we're doing this even. Just try to put a little bit more information out there that's available to everybody, even if you don't have $60 an hour to pay somebody to talk to you. And you don't have the connections, right? Because it's great if you have connections with co-op people. Like we were saying, co-op people will often talk to you for free if they have the time and the capacity. But if you don't have those connections and you're just some person trying to get into this, it can be pretty intimidating and not look like solidarity all that much, personally. So on that note, what political ideologies are most popular among cooperativists? Chris, you want to take a shot at this?
For what I've seen, one is a political being passive toward charismatic leadership. I don't know. Does that? I know it's not like the isms that maybe someone's looking for. I kind of see that.
Is that an ideology? It's just like go along with the charismatic guy ideology. I think it's just called authoritarianism.
Yeah. So authoritarianism. Yeah. This is authoritarianism, like false conscious authoritarianism. I feel like that's a thing.
We're way too cynical. Come on, we're supposed to be promoting co-ops.
And then there's also liberalism. I kind of feel like liberalism is pretty popular.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of leftism for sure. Let's not leave out the obvious one. And this is an interesting question. I'm not really a fan of this question on the cooperatives page. And we actually, I think, have a rule. Low effort posting. This seems like a low effort post to me. But anyway, it's because a lot of the people on the Reddit cooperatives page who come there seem to me anyway, from what I can tell, to be young leftists, kind of radical leftists, right? And so often, people showing up and will say things, that don't make any sense if you're, in the cooperative space, any REI is not a co-op, or my credit union is not a co-op, or whatever, XYZ big co-op is not a co-op because it's not a worker co-op. And expressing some pretty radical, egalitarian ideologies, which is another one. I think if you go to the Reddit cooperatives page, the most likely political ideology you are to run across is progressive leftism, and then I guess liberalism maybe second. But that said, we have people who are into co-ops all across the political spectrum. I was listening to a podcast today with a union guy, union organizer, and he was talking about this, how, in the union organizing, you have to make tactical decisions. You have to be able to separate tactics from ideology. And so you're going to work with this guy who's wearing a Trump hat to work every day on your shared concerns about the job. you're not going to agree on anything, these other things, but you have to put that aside. So you work together to get your shared thing, your shared goal across. The same thing happens in co-ops. There are people who don't necessarily share political ideologies at all, will nonetheless work together quite closely and quite effectively to meet their shared need, because we're decent at that as humans. So I think for me, the answer to this is, who really knows? And there probably isn't one in particular. What does at least unite everybody is the concept that if we all work together for the benefit of everybody, we'll all be better off. Right? I don't know if that's a political ideology or not, but it seems to be one that pretty much everybody who's a cooperator shares on some level. Don't you think, Chris?
Yeah, I do see that. That's one reason why I kind of like the co-op world a bit more, is that because like, even though like there's other spaces where I'm at where people do not want to talk to liberals at all, but there are a lot of liberals in the co-op world, and people who otherwise wouldn't, like the anarchists, like other anarchists, they usually don't want to talk to liberals. Like they'll talk to the liberals in the co-op world. It's not really an issue. But I do have to say though, like my experience with a lot of the co-op world is, for whatever reason, I don't really get to go that deep into like getting to a point asking people like, hey, do you have a political ideology? What is it? Unfortunately, a lot of it is still kind of transactional. That's just my experience. I'm sure others, like, they get together and all that, but I'm pretty limited in my insights.
Yeah, that's also one of the things that personally, I think, why I don't really like these questions when they show up on our cooperatives. And I've even, as a mod, I've removed a couple of them that were just too, like, you're just trying to start shit with people. You're just trying to stir the pot here. This is not helpful. We're not here to talk about politics per se as such, I guess, in the way it's generally talked about. We're here to talk about co-ops. So, but here's an interesting, from Carbon Penguin, he kind of, comes as like, oh, there's a whole bunch of people, all the way from liberals and progressives to ethnic nationalists, like black nationalists in the U.S., for instance. So it really runs the gamut. But I think it is good to keep in mind, just because somebody's into co-ops doesn't mean that you're going to have anything else in common with them necessarily, for better and for worse. But certainly there, as people are pointing out, down here, the Catholic tradition has, there's co-ops all over that, of course, with Father Arizmendi Arrieta, the help founding Mondragon co-ops, and we've also had priests here in this country, whose faces I can see in my head right now, but whose names Cody, Father Cody, and there's another one, black gentleman who Catholic co-ops or Catholic priests and very involved in co-op organizing. And I would guess, as Catholics, have a somewhat conservative social ideology that I would probably not share, but that's,
Yeah, Carbon Penguin's bullet points, I have seen all that. Though the Social Democrats and Market Socialists, I'm not sure if they use that. I'm not sure if they would use that term for themselves. Market Socialists.
Yeah, I'm not really a fan, frankly, just in general, of kind of all these ideological labels. I feel like they tend to get in the way of us working together and finding our shared ground that we can build around more than anything else, and becomes just a reason for infighting among people. Sometimes there are certainly like very important differences in ideology. Important differences in ideology just broke up my mother's church, for instance. Recently, the United Methodist Church is split in two over this ideology relating to how we relate to gay folks. And so there can be real differences that mean you can't work with somebody, but by and large, the vast majority of the time, it seems to me, at least in my experience, is that Much better to forego talking and thinking too much about the political ideologies when you're trying to do co-op work, and focusing on the work that you're actually trying to do. And then, once you've worked with somebody successfully, I will say this, if you are just interested in convincing somebody to adopt your political ideology, one of the best ways to do that is to work with them in a situation where, they can see that you're a hardworking, trustworthy, good sort of person. And then when you talk to them about other things unrelated to what you're working on together, they're more likely to listen to you and take you seriously, than if you just show up and, you're
call him a petty bourgeois.
Right. Yeah. It's like, the first thing out of your mouth is you call him a fascist and a xenophobe, and a petty bourgeois, bootlicker. And, and then it's like, are we going to unload the food truck for the co-op or what? Like, what's that petty bourgeois bootlicker? Are you kidding me? Like, this is not helping things. And he's not going to listen to you when you try to tell him about, why his, views on, I don't know, gender specific bathrooms, for instance, are misguided, but, so anyway, this is at least, my
petty
take.
bourgeois, such a petty bourgeois response, Josh.
No, it comes from living in Montana, from being like a leftist, like a real leftist in a state that's like half libertarians, half like progressive Democrats. And it's like, you just got to deal, and so you learn how to do that. So,
yeah, somebody told me they're insulted recently by calling that, but they're like, it kind of flew over their head because actually they didn't understand what all that stuff meant.
They were insulted by what?
Someone threw like that insult at them. Oh, you're petty bourgeois.
Oh,
and then I was explaining to them. Yeah, I was explaining to them that this is what it means and this is what they're trying to say. He's like, oh, I'm just a farmer, man.
Oh man, calling the farmer petty bourgeois. I mean, if the guy actually works on his farm, I don't know. It's
really he does.
And also, petty bourgeois comes from like the late 19th century, early 20th century. I don't know that this is a reasonable category for us to still be using in 2024. Another issue. So, moving on to something a little more fun. Sell me on food co-ops versus a normal grocery store. I'm the consumer. What's the hype? Says Mr. I always say Mr. I assume everybody on Reddit's a dude. I don't know why. It's probably right like 85% of the time. But Thumpsky, Mr. or Miss Thumpsky says, sell me on food co-ops versus a normal grocery store. I'm the consumer. What's the hype? What's the hype, Chris?
Don't get me involved unless it's got a worker co-op component to it. I'm tired of, so if it's got a worker co-op
other avenues. This is Other Avenues grocery store or Rainbow grocery store in San Francisco, both of which are worker owned food co-ops. What's the hype?
So part of it, well, me is the relational thing. Like I like that, like I'll be able to just like to talk to the workers and they can be able to talk back and not afraid they're going to get fired. I don't like seeing I don't know. I don't like seeing workers living in fear, so to me, that's a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
I tried doing it for a couple decades.
Mm-hmm. So, and then chances are, they're going to have there's higher retention. So they're going to have a better idea of what products they have, what they're selling, what's coming from. And, that's one thing I look to as well. Like I don't, man, all the food is very mystifying. So that'll be cool for me. Yeah. Like, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're right. Definitely for a worker co-op grocery store, the fact that you're doing business with, people and interacting with people working there who are empowered and not disempowered by their work is huge. And especially for those of us who have spent a lot of time working in those disempowering jobs where you do have to bite your tongue and you can't say the thing that you're thinking because the boss might not like it, or the teenager that you're serving might complain to the manager, and now you're trying to find a new job. So knowing that that's not the situation in any business that you're doing business with is great and worth going out of your way just for that. Secondly, even with consumer cooperatives, they're definitely not perfect. We've run plenty of stories or linked stories about like PCC and a number of co-ops in the Midwest who had unionizing struggles, I guess, and really is like that. Often seems like the co-op management and board kind of makes the unionization push into a struggle. And that has been kind of disappointing. On the other hand, I think if you are working in the grocery sector and, not in management, but just, rank and file, just, as a stocker or a checker or a cleaner, that working at a co-op is probably going to be a superior job to working at someplace else. Like I said, even with you're going to have all of the union busting bullshit someplace else as well. At least in the co-op, you have the ability to talk to the members who are the actual owners and try to have some, get some leverage that way. So even if it's not a great food co-op, I think it's probably still better for the workers. But there are some that are better than others for sure. Yeah, that's about all I can come up with. Apart from that, it's a grocery store. You need to eat food. So they used to be the place to go for organic food. Used to be the only place to go. Not so much the case anymore. So, Chris has put his cap on. What do you got there?
The Mandela co-op. I haven't been there, but I've heard good things. I hope to go one day. It looks better than what I've seen in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Is that a worker owned? I've definitely know that name.
Yeah, it's supposed to be worker owned. We can look it up real quick. Let's see.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I'm a little embarrassed by this. I don't remember the details, but we did do an interview. I didn't do it, but I think Malakia and Cadwell maybe interviewed somebody from Mandela Food Co-op at a conference several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see while you're looking that up.
It says, unlike conventional supermarkets and grocery stores, Mandela is operated, centrally governed, and democratically controlled by our worker owners. Our structure and operations are guided by cooperative principles and a strong community-centered mission. Yeah, someone got this as a gift for me last year, so I wear it on a special occasions.
It's a sick gift.
Yeah.
There you go. That looks like the Chris I know. So next question from what's going on?
Hey, yeah. One thing that I wanted to say about the last one too, though, is that I would love to go to like a worker-owned co-op and also kind of have the experience where someone tells me like, dude, I can't help you today. Like, I'm having a bad day. Because it's one of the things that I kind of think about a lot is going when I go to the stores and like want to ask someone for help. I'm like, man, like it sucks how like you always just got to be positive and all that, and you can't tell somebody like, hey man, today's not the day. I'm barely trying to hold it together. Because I would love to go to a store and someone's like, nah man, it ain't gonna happen today. And
go talk to somebody else.
And they can say without fear, and some people might be. I know, like in the USA, a lot of people expect everyone to be like in positive mode all the time when they're outside, but
So
the
toxic.
reality is, yeah, I don't like that. If someone wants to talk to me, if someone's talking to me, I only want to talk to them if they want to talk to me. So I would love to
Mhm.
go to the store, yeah, and someone's like, nah, go talk to someone else.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like I mean, it, I always appreciate the few times when I've had a waitress at a restaurant who is just visibly not into being there, like at all, and not even trying to hide it. It's like, cool, nice. I can respect that. You're getting a big tip.
Yeah.
So okay. What's going on says pain points that are specific to a co-op. I recently learned about the co-op business structure and am fascinated by the philosophy of this structure. Are there any specific tools or infrastructures that this kind of model needs but lacks at the moment? In other words, what are some pain points that are specific to forming and running a co-op? So there's the question. I mean, there's one big obvious pain point. There's a couple of big obvious ones, but when it comes to forming a co-op, the biggest one in my experience and my humble estimation is getting people to be cooperative. And I just posted on Thursday an interview that woman, Kathy Statz, who is a co-op educator with the National Farmers Union. She gave an interview on everything co-op, and in her conversation with Vernon, she quoted this co-op organizer from the 1920s or 1930s who said, the people ask what the biggest roadblock is for their becoming more co-ops, and he said that co-ops always have these two problems. One, the co-ops are opposed to privilege, and two, what was the other one? They're opposed to privilege, and the other one.
The other one sounds pretty deep.
Hold on. I like talk about brain fart, embarrassing moment. Like we ended up having a conversation with somebody about it. Okay, here's the quote. People do not know about cooperatives because of two things. First, a lack of information concerning cooperation, and second, the fact that its principles are opposed to privilege. Cooperatives have two things working against them: ignorance and selfishness. So, on the one hand, I think that's very apropos. That really sums it up. In trying to get across to convince people, at least this is what I've had to do. Like, there have been a lot of people who've needed to be convinced that if we all work together for the good of everybody, it'll be good for all of us. They kind of don't believe that can work. They've been real brainwashed by American media and our economy and this kind of entrepreneurialist, capitalist mindset that everybody is expected to have. And so find it really difficult to just believe at all. Like, I've gotten into arguments with good friends, like extreme, we're yelling at each other and pointing in each other's faces, arguments with people I've been friends with for years over whether or not it's possible to run a restaurant as a worker co-op, because they had been a manager at a big restaurant for a long time, and there was no way that no, you have to have a manager, you have to have top-down control, you have to have hierarchy, blah, 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 blah. And so, like, he was an extreme case, but a lot of people have that, where it's like they haven't seen it, they haven't experienced it, and so it just seems like it sounds like a bunch of hippie stuff to me. I don't know. And so, just convincing people that, yeah, it can work, and like showing lots of examples usually have to do to get them there. That to me is a real big pain point. And then also getting people, once again, as Americans, I think is maybe especially hard, overcoming this idea that I want to have some kind of privilege. I want to lead a privileged life, and that whatever I'm doing needs to be leading me towards that. And if it's not, then I'm making some kind of sacrifice. and that's nonsense, right? But if you have that mentality that being successful means having privilege, leading a privileged life, then you're not going to be real into co-ops, I think. Because at least in my view, in co-ops and how it should be, like if we're going to have solidarity with each other, I'm not going to have more than I need unless you've got everything that you need, right? Everybody gets enough before any of us gets more than enough, you know? So not real patriotic of me, I know.
I think this is one of the ones I didn't have an answer to right away. I was like thinking about it. I think from what I've seen, I think the pain point is that people, because co-op relationships are so disincentivized, people are trying to like expand that sphere and expand these relationships in a totally hostile environment. And I think that's what makes it hardest, right? That's like there's no incentive, there's really not much like institutional or relational support for people to come together, especially like as much time as they need to, right? Because a lot of people like they can't take time off from their job. Well, I'm talking about like poor people, you know, can't take time off of their job in order to solve this or that problem, you know. So and I think that in the development of the co-op, and I think that one pain point for me that stands out a lot is when people are unable to meet as frequently as they want, and so that develops like its own type of incoherence, and I think it develops cohesion problems too. um like the trust that people need to be building as they're taking on more and more serious things. Like I think that requires a lot of time that people need to put in, but a lot of people can't because you know just traveling and all that stuff, work, and then you know chances are, especially if they're renters, still dealing with landlord, slumlord, you know all that stuff. You know, very little time. So yeah, and I think people from different classes are going to experience different types of pain points, I suspect. But for me, that's what comes to mind. It's kind of like we're dealing with a system. We're fighting against a system to do a different system.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is really, you know, it's one of these kind of catch-22 situations where those of us who need a new economic system the most also have the least capacity to be put towards like organizing that because we're struggling just to survive in the messed up system that we have. And the people who do have the time and the resources to put towards, you know, trying to change the system, well, personally, they don't need it because there's the system's working all right for them. And secondly, it's just, you know, recapitulating the power dynamics of the people with the wealth and the money and the prestige make all the decisions. And, you know, people who are working with their hands for a living and their backs, you know, take what they are offered. So, yeah, that's an issue.
And then there's that other question. Are there any specific tools or infrastructure that this kind of model needs but lacks at the moment? I feel like I suspect that something that, you know, I don't, like I said, there's like an aloofness. I see it among a lot of cooperators, but well, with like between me and a lot of cooperators. But I suspect that as more and more people get involved, I think that what's always going to be needed to overcome this stuff is more solidarity, more empathy, and more sacrifice among those who have more those who have lots more surplus, lots more things that they shouldn't have, that ill-gotten gains, you know, the benefits of colonialism, stuff like that.
Yeah. So for infrastructure, and we've had this conversation with Geo people, like it comes up every so often. One of the main things that I think is needed and that can really help a business and can also is essential for like community organizing is space, just having some space. For businesses, having space where you can like store your stuff, even if you're doing like a market table or something, having space to keep that. Like if everybody's like renting and everybody's living in tiny little apartments, and it's like you're trying to start a business and you got, where are we going to put our canopy and our tables and our, whatever it is that you're selling, all this stuff. So like having communal space, I guess, is like community owned and run, or cooperatively owned and run in some manner, and that is with an eye towards being super affordable, if not free, for people to make use of in their organizing, and also just as a place to meet and socialize, and get together. And I remember one of our last, I don't know if it was a live stream or one of these Q&As, Chris, you were saying how you actually like meetings that are super long. It's like I want an 8-hour meeting. I want to just like be hanging out and eating as part of it and stuff. And I think that there's something, it doesn't have to be a meeting per se, but like I said, if you're going to do these hard things together, you need to build a lot of trust with each other. You need to know who's who, and that just requires spending a lot of time together. And in order to do that, there has to be the space available. And if everybody's in a tiny little apartment, it's like, well, we can't have 10 people come over here in my little place and we're all like, act like we're in a crowded elevator or something and try to socialize. Like it's nice to have a big space. And it's one of the things that got us in New York, on Staten Island, New York City. One of the real nice places about that, they've got, when I was there, it was about 80 people. I think they're maybe down to like 70 or something now, but consciously like making the community a little smaller. But they've got a lot of public space, and there are several different residential buildings they own. There's just big dining rooms and like living rooms and stuff that's just available for anybody to use. And as a result of that, the people who live there, because they're always just commingling with each other, like every week in the newsletter, there's like a bunch of events that people just organize together because they're just in the same space. They're, the right type of people, they're all interested in, similar types of stuff, and they have the space to hang out, and they have the space to actually, do the events that they come up with. So, I think just having that, super important. And again, for businesses, one of the biggest expenses is going to be your rent, right? Or, your building rent. So if you can get into a situation, something like they were doing with the real estate cooperative in Vermont, or what they're trying to do with the permanent real estate, cooperative in the Bay Area, have cooperatively owned like storefronts, buildings that can then be leased out to worker co-ops for less than market rate, right?
Man, I'm surprised. I thought you were gonna go on a 5-minute rant about the blockchain.
No, I'm trying not to think about blockchain anymore.
We don't need the blockchain. You sure? It might be
we certainly do not need the blockchain.
Might be that silver bullet we're all looking for.
Here's another pain point that I want to mention because it doesn't get talked about much. And that is, especially for poor people, we're trying to start up a worker co-op. It costs money, right? I mean, whatever you're doing, there's going to be expenses involved with it. And it's a risky proposition. And you're going to be working for free for the first year or two, right? You're not going to be getting paid probably. So let's say you're a group of low-income manual laborers working to set up your worker co-op. So the first couple of years, you're putting money in, you're like reducing your spending in other areas of your life with your limited income so that you can spend money on the co-op. You're also putting in labor that you're not getting paid for. And then you're working with developers who may themselves want to get paid. And so this, to me, it is both a pain point for people who are, low income and trying to set up a worker co-op, but it's also an injustice from like a solidarity perspective that, you have people making middle-class salaries, middle-class incomes, helping people basically gamble or take a risk. And if the thing doesn't work out, the co-op developer still got paid and still gets paid. but the worker owners may have just, you just put a bunch of money in and a couple of years of your life, and well, the business didn't work out. That happens sometimes. So that is something like, one, it's a pain point. I think personally, a co-op developer, like, we need to have some kind of Hippocratic oath that's like, I'm not going to make more than the people that I work, that I'm serving, or something like that. And again, there's a lot to unpack there, but maybe for another day.
Yeah, that's a heavy topic of like more holding professionals accountable.
Yes, that seems to be the theme today. Holding you PMC assholes to account. We're coming
but
for
you. That is a big deal though, the lack of space. Like I know in Rojava, in their revolution, at SERP, I remember reading an article where they're like, hey, we construct this assembly space. And it's really incredible because like we're developing all these like local democracies, all these communes, but we don't really have space to assemble and stuff. So like they're like, supposedly they're having at that point in time, like a big priority was to create all these assembly spaces for people to get together.
Yeah.
And it's a big problem in Chicago to find space. And then I feel like one of the things that happens in Chicago is that like half the year, it's almost like the city kind of stops because it gets cold and there's not, and I don't think it's just that it's cold. I think that there's not really enough space to accommodate people to continue getting together.
You can't go to the park and hang out,
No, and yeah, it's just hard, especially space where it's affordable or free. I wouldn't mind paying for space to meet, but it's not really affordable, practical.
Yeah. That's definitely an issue. I mean, but I was going to just add, although you say in Chicago in the winter, it's not really possible, but making good use and as much use as we can as the public space that's available to us when it's available. But yeah, I think that's something that, if, anybody who's working with a nonprofit organization or community organization is really thinking about, what can we do that's like support the ecosystem, as it were. I think, having some kind of community space that's available. I know in Missoula, man, the public library, that has been such a resource for organizing in that community because they just have, like study rooms that anybody can reserve for an hour, and they have like presentation rooms, and we've, used that a lot. So, kind of thinking outside the box, even if you can't afford your own permanent place, at least, scoping out what publicly available places there are, being a little creative about it, checking out places you might not necessarily think of. There was one local business in Missoula, one brewery that also, like, as part of their community commitment, had a little like organizing room that they kept available for any organizers to use. So
see what the co-ops are up to, if they have any shared spaces. In Chicago, there is this one space that I feel like the city has changed a lot since it went away, but it was called Multiculti. And a lot of people would use it. It was awesome. It kind of felt like it was a whole floor in a building, and with all these different rooms, and people have meetings, and it was really cool. And but I remember at some point it started to collapse because it was just financially not workable. And then at the at the last second, they were trying to implement ways to basically like crowdfund the space to be for them to be able to pay the rent or whatever. And it was too late at that point. But I think I feel like there was a lot more kind of like cross collaboration building up in Chicago because of Multiculti, that I feel like it's kind of like it went away. And I feel like that momentum got lost. So I don't know. I think that was like, and at that time when we use it, I'll feel very uncomfortable. I'll be like in the group, like, hey, let's pay something for this space because like I'm pretty sure the space ain't free. And nobody ever wanted to pay, and that was weird, man. I was like, dude, not even $1, like just give $1 each or something. And yeah, I feel like something was really lost from that. And so That's why, like, a lot of times I harp, like, when we go, if we meet up somewhere, like, let's give something to whoever's hosting or whatever, just get into the habit. And if anybody creates any spaces in the future, get creative to have like different types of sustainers, because I do think that space is really important.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is one reason why they say if you give something away for free, people don't value it, and that certainly can be the case. So I'm actually a proponent. While I am like, yes, free community space, that there is no financial barrier to using it, but I think there probably should be some barrier to using it so that you have to value it, right? Okay, yeah, you can use the meeting. Or you can use the space. It's either $15 or you come for an hour, one day this week and and help sweep up around the place. Something like that, or you bring us some more paper plates because we're running out, like little shit like that. That is like, even if it's just kind of a token, it can change how people think about, this thing. And I mean, and to me, that's really the problem. Like I used to, for a couple of years, was the board chair for our local Grange. And we have this old building built by farmers back in the 30s, totally not up to any code that has ever been put on the books. It is a disaster. But trying to get that building up to par and work on it was just, really difficult because a lot of people didn't take ownership of it. Like we were just kind of handed the building, as a group of people by the Grange organization. And there were only a couple of us who felt like, ownership of the building. Like, this is our shit now. We got to make it better. And a lot of people, I got the impression, was kind of like, oh, this is just, convenient. And, but didn't really, I don't know, didn't take ownership. It was kind of an easy come, easy go sort of situation. So, I think if you, can put a little bit of, you got to give to get in there, that can be useful sometimes. But YMMV, Chris is spacing out on me. He's reading his phone. So I suppose
I am reading my phone. You are so perceptive.
It's time for us to wrap up.
I was updating some folks I got to meet with on the north side. I feel like this is one of those days where we're just sort of like starting to kick up, but then we got to close it out. Next time we'll talk about the virtues of the crypto market, right?
yeah, let's do it. That should be fun. I'm trying to think of something clever that also uses crypto that isn't cryptocurrency, but I can't do it because that's the only thing crypto anymore that anybody knows. We could do a cryptography session and why it's important to use encrypted emails when you're doing your co-op organizing. I'm into that kind of crypto.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So before we wrap up, though, I will say that if anybody watching this says, man, these guys don't know dick about co-ops and I would be much better at answering these questions, please send us an email and you can join us and answer these questions and do a better job than we are doing next time. You can email us at editors@geo.coop. So hit the like and subscribe button, of course, and go to our news or our website at geo.coop, subscribe to our newsletter, all that good stuff. And we will see you next month for another Reddit Q&A.
And if you saw any value in this, there's the donate link. Josh, alone we know a little bit, together we know a lot.